Once upon a time, the world was a place where people could meet freely without fear of unknowingly spreading disease and infection. This was a time when the multitudes would gather for events, share meals together, embrace one another with hugs, exchange handshakes, and learn together in classrooms. Little did we know that almost overnight this would all change. For spreading throughout the land was a new ailment, the likes of which hadn't been seen in generations. And this disease would claim the lives of millions and upend life as we knew it. For education, this led to empty classrooms for many across the globe. Teachers and students alike found themselves thrust into the world of online education without much of a warning or chance to prepare. It is here we find Travis, an entirely unremarkable teacher, save for a head of long frizzy brown hair, who, like his peers, was just trying his best to make this new online class experience the most meaningful as possible. Assigned with the task of teaching an English oral communication class, Travis found himself with a bit of a conundrum. How would he get his students to interact meaningfully when they wouldn't meet together in person?
Hello, I'm Travis. First, I'd like to thank Coach Teasel for giving me the opportunity to present here at this international conference. And thank you to you who made it through my overly dramatic introduction. But I thought no good presentation on digital storytelling would be complete without a digital story. So you saw all about me and my situation in the previous slide. So let's get right into it. So I had this problem of how to make a meaningful interaction with this online asynchronous class. And my colleagues and I, we decided to use a platform called Flipgrid. And I'll get into that in this next slide. But if you see here, you can see the outline of the presentation. So I'll introduce Flipgrid, and I'll talk about how it's difficult to create meaningful interaction there, and then how I use stories and collaborative storytelling as a way to improve that. So I'll give some framework on storytelling and digital stories, and then introduce a project I did, a little bit of research. So let's move on. To begin, I'd like to give a simple introduction on the video sharing platform Flipgrid. It's available for free, and it can be used on various devices, from a tablet to a smartphone to a PC, or any kind of computer with a microphone and a camera. We chose this because it would be an easy way to arrange our classes. So students are arranged into grids, and they're given login information from the teacher, and those grids are just classes. And so inside, once they join the class, a teacher will create a topic, a self-introduction topic. And then students have an opportunity to make a video reply to that topic. And after they've recorded and uploaded their reply, they'll be able to see their classmates' replies as well. And so it's closed. And so they don't see videos from the outside, they only see things inside of their class. And so it was a good way to, even though we're not meeting in a physical place, to still come together as a class in this location of Flipgrid. So that's how Flipgrid generally works, but I'll give you a kind of a view of what it looks like for students and for teachers. So it's very easy to manage and make and manage assignments. This is kind of what it looks like here. They'll see a description, they'll see the responses that are there, they can open it up, and they can view the individual responses and hit that record button to make their own video. And when they do make their own video, it looks kind of like this. So they'll be able to add text, add pictures, add emojis, and then after they record it, they'll be able to edit and add more. And so it's really easy to use, and it's pretty convenient, and can be a lot of fun. So Flipgrid, the way I think a lot of people are using it, and the way I was initially using it, were for assignments like discussion questions. So a teacher would introduce a topic, each person would give their opinion on it. I also tried ranking activities, where they would, share their opinions that way. Movie reviews, book reviews, and also I use this for class presentations. Now those activities worked well, but I didn't want students to just make those videos for me. And so additionally, I asked them to reply, so make a video reply to 2 of their classmates' videos in hopes of sparking some kind of conversation. It started off okay, as you see here. You can see the number of comments, and they were talking to each other. But after a few weeks, it really started to dwindle and kind of sharply decline. So there we go. But what I noticed is even if there were a lot of comments on someone's video, the original poster might not have watched them or even responded to them. And so there wasn't really a conversation. It was, oh, I'm going to ask a question about your video, and nobody's going to get a response. And so I wasn't so happy with that. And then you see after a couple of weeks, the number of comments really declined, and there's maybe 1. And I think that in this particular situation, that was a really motivated few students who are leaving most of the comments in the class of 17. So my question is, so how can we increase interaction and engagement on a platform like Flipgrid? So the answer I came up with was a collaborative story. And what this is like, I'm sure you've experienced maybe a pass the story kind of activity where members of a group will work together and tell one single coherent story. And each person in the group is going to take turns telling one part of the narrative, and it's passed to the next person. And so I thought this was a good idea because it would encourage students to watch more videos. They would have to see each part of the story, especially the ones that preceded their own section. I thought that students would have to really think deeply and consider what has happened in the past in the story, and then how they're going to progress the plot. And so that would be an increase in creativity. And I thought most of all it would be fun. I was doing this at the same time a lot with my daughter, my 3-4-year-old daughter, and this is kind of where I initially got it. And we had so much fun passing these ideas back and forth, and I thought, why couldn't students do that too? And hopefully working together on this single story, I thought it would be a kind of a community building through co-creating. So even though we're all alone, we can come together and we can work together on something meaningful, something fun, and hopefully something rewarding for our language learning experience. So there is a theoretical grounding for using stories as pedagogy. As I mentioned, even in bringing up this idea with my young daughter, how we teach children through stories. This is from a socio-constructivist perspective, drawing from Vygotsky's work. Knowledge is co-created and co-constructed through interaction. This is true for children, as Vygotsky was interested in, but I think it's also true for anyone. And the idea is each person has their own understanding, and that we can build understanding together when we come together and share. There's been research that shows that stories create an opportunity for meaningful interaction, and that it also increases involvement in learning. Also, from a more cognitive perspective, we have Mayer's dual channel assumption. And this is a straightforward idea of our brain is a limited capacity processor, and when we're being fed input, both visually and from an auditory channel, that increases the ability to retain that information, to recall that information. And so when we use stories, when we're speaking, of course, that's going through our ears, but if we're also engaging in some kind of visual aspect, whether that's a video or acting or pictures that will also give input to the visual side of things. And included in Mayer's work is this active learning assumption, and saying that meaningful learning occurs when people are more engaged in selecting relevant information, creating like a coherent verbal representation, and also selecting images. So when we're engaged in that idea, story creation, it'll be more engaged learning and more meaningful learning. And I think all of those things can apply to second language learning, but there also has been research specifically of using stories in second language classrooms from children all the way to adults. And some benefits of using stories is exposure to target language and meaningful use and practice of the target language. And especially if you're doing this with somebody, there's a negotiation of meaning. And there's that study comes from Huang in 2016. So next we have digital storytelling, and this is a great way of incorporating current technology with the age-old art of telling stories. DST is a movement that spawned with the birth of computers, and it's mixing stories with audio, images, and video. Robin categorized DST into three main types: personal narratives, so telling a story of yourself; some historical documentary, or stories that are meant to inform or instruct. There are lots of benefits for DST. Again, going back to Robin in his 2008 work, he says, and he argues that it develops a 21st century literacy, 21st century skills, including digital literacy, global literacy, using technology, and visual literacy. And so all of those things can be improved through telling stories digitally. It also fosters sentence construction skills. So putting sentences together, creating subjects, objects, verbs, complex sentences, and telling stories. If you're speaking, this can include oral skills. So there was a study by Tahiri in Iran and about how this digital storytelling can be beneficial to speaking. Of course, speaking and listening to stories, so this helps with listening comprehension. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a great chance for increasing learner engagement. And so that's something I was especially interested in my main question of how do I get these learners in my class to be more engaged? So I did notice a few gaps in the research concerning DST. I won't read through everything, you can pause and take a look. But why doesn't Robin include fiction? I think fiction is really powerful and can help us make sense of the world and go beyond literal to find deeper meaning and deeper truth. Also, collaboration. Most of these research articles were focused on individual activities, with a few that were slightly into collaboration, but very little, especially on this pass the story kind of co-creating a single narrative. I only found one study, and that was from a management journal, but that's the Gabriel and Connell study. But stories can be a vehicle for community building, is what they found. And there's an increased feeling of ownership over the story that I think would be really beneficial for creating that community feeling in my own class, especially with this online asynchronous class. So my current study here, I had two questions. Does collaborative storytelling on Flipgrid increase learner engagement in this async class? And does collaborative storytelling work as a community building exercise? Here's what I did. Feel free to pause and read through the participants. I'll get right into the project, and the task was to work together in a group and create a single coherent story on Flipgrid. So we had two groups in a class of 17, so 8 and 9, and we had 3 weeks of storytelling, starting from a very controlled story into more free activities. The first one being Momotaro, which is a very famous Japanese fairy tale that all the students know. And so I introduced that story, and then students retold that in their groups, each making a video. And then we went on to an original fairy tale after that, where they, using the same fairy tale format, and they came up with their own ideas. And for the final week, I gave them 4 different genres, and then students were able to pick 2 that they would like to have contributed videos to. So in order to make the storytelling a little easier, I introduced students to this 3-act story structure that is prevalent among movies and stories. And when I introduced the Momotaro, I kind of set it inside of this 3-act structure. I showed them how it fits into this. So students, I think, were initially uncomfortable with the terms, but just instinctively we know the concepts. They're so familiar to us because everybody's heard so many stories that follow this kind of 3-act structure of an exposition, a midpoint, some climax, and then a resolution. I further divided that 3-act structure into 9 plot points, and students then would be responsible for making a video that covers just one of the plot points in the story. And it wasn't predetermined who would do what. It was kind of a first come, first serve. So if you were the first person to open that, you would do the exposition. Or if you opened it and you saw that, oh, the person before me did a low point, I have to do the climax. And so that's how we organized the videos. And so there would be 9 entries. And I think that made it a little easier to understand and for students to feel comfortable in what they were responsible for creating. So here are some examples of the kinds of images and the kinds of videos students made. Some students, especially initially, would show their face, and then along with some pictures at the bottom while they were narrating the action of the story. This is from Momotaro. Other students would sometimes use props and put the props in front of their camera and mix that together with using pictures, and that was really fun and cute. I think Elmo is a Oni here. He's a demon asking for money. But then by the end, most students were strictly just sticking to finding images and putting together a story and narrating over these images. But I thought all of it was really creative and really well done. So after 3 weeks of this, we did Momotaro, we did an original fairy tale, and then the expanded genre activity. Students were given a survey, and this was kind of a mixed approach of some Likert scale questions where they were responding about their attitudes, and then also some free response questions too. And so let's look at those in terms of the results as well as the questions that I had posed. So regarding collaborative storytelling and learner engagement, students enjoyed the assignments. We see overwhelming positive results. 1 on this Likert scale here is strong disagree. And then on the right side, is 5 would be the strong agree. When asked, compared to other normal Flipgrid assignments that I had been doing, was the storytelling assignments better or worse and why? And here are some student responses. Overwhelmingly positive, as you can read here. They needed imagination in addition to English skills, so they enjoyed it. They liked thinking of new stories by themselves. There were a few who didn't particularly love it because it takes a long time to collect materials and to put pictures together, and it's more difficult. But actually, even though that's a negative feeling towards that, it's a response that I appreciated it because it also shows that they had to really be engaged with this even though they don't particularly love it. So the stakes were also higher than other assignments. There were greater risks. This was a particularly interesting comment. I think if I make a mistake, it could cause problems for other students. And I think that's a bad point compared to other videos. Or I felt the need to take care of each other to avoid posting the same scenes as other students. So that was a little troublesome. However, imagining stories was fun. And so I think this greater concern for the group is indicative of a sense of community. And so we're building that, and they're thinking of each other more than they would be with just the normal videos. Also, most students did feel favorable to include pictures and images in their stories. Though, of course, there were those two from the comments we saw before that didn't like it, but most people did. And we see that the making and including those visual aspects really helps the stories to be easy to understand. And that's supported by the dual assumption model that we mentioned earlier. There was a feeling of anxiety over sharing your own story. So a lot of students didn't feel that they could share their ideas very clearly. And I don't know if that was due to speaking and their language skill or following the 3-act structure. However, there was a really positive response to students saying that they could understand their classmates' videos. So even though they didn't feel comfortable sharing their own idea or how well they did, they could understand their classmates. I really appreciated the results here of an increased motivation to watch videos. So technically you would only need to watch your own group's story. However, everybody but one, all the students but one, watched the other groups. And there was an overwhelming reporting that they watched more videos during this assignment than they did in previous Flipgrid assignments. So, yay! Focusing on that second question about community building and how this, I think it connects pretty closely to engagement. There's a greater pride over the completed story. And so this is also something we found in that Gabriel and Connell article. But they were interested in seeing how their story ended. So of course for the assignment, technically they didn't need to watch the next video after theirs, but only one person reported that they weren't neither interested or disinterested. But everybody agreed that my group made a good story. And so there's ownership there. They felt proud of it. And again, to put more support to this idea that collaborative storytelling can work as a community building exercise, there was a lot of agreement that they felt connected to the group. Only 2 students were neither strong agree or disagree. Okay, there are a lot of comments here, but you can pause and read through these. I'll highlight a few. Specific towards the storytelling activities, students said that they thought it was joyful and that it was fun to connect a story together with their classmates. They watched more of their classmates' videos. They enjoyed it more than other assignments because they could interact with their friends in a meaningful way. So that was specific to storytelling. Now, Flipgrid in general, I asked questions about that. They liked that they were able to see their faces and hear their voices. And then this class actually, in the fall semester, did have a couple of classes in person, the same group, not in oral communication. And so when they did meet, they felt like, oh, it was very easy to get along. They already had some idea of who their classmates were, what their faces were, and they knew some things about them. So it was easier when they did meet in person. So just a few implications as I wrap up here. I think it's difficult. It's difficult to use these kinds of video sharing platforms to make something really meaningful and getting students to interact. And so we need to be creative in bringing people together. And I think a collaborative activity, something like this collaborative storytelling, can increase engagement, and it can help build a sense of community even when we are so far away. And especially just thinking about this past year, social networking sites and media, those kinds of platforms have been helpful to people, but it's also disconnected people in a lot of ways and built up walls of an us versus them. And it's been a really difficult year for a lot of people. And so as teachers, I think we have a great opportunity to influence how people see these things. And if we can give them activities where they're coming together, different people are coming together and building something together and working together and collaborating in a really meaningful way, I think that would be a great thing for the world and us doing our part when we can. So thank you. So that brings us to the end of this presentation. I'd like to thank you for being with me here, and for Korea TESOL for giving me this opportunity to share what I did this past year. And so thank you. Again, I'm Travis Past. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me here. And I'm looking forward to hearing from you and to speak with you more. I'll have my references on the next slide, and I'll hide my face so you can read them well. If you're interested, please read through some of the research that I found, and thank you.